Okay, I didn't record this for some reason. Don't know why. Anyway, Darwin, as I explained in class, and others, saw what was called sexual dimorphism. That means males and females look differently. And there were a number of different hypotheses for why this was so. And what struck Darwin was that many of the features, so that males, the sexual dimorphism means that males and females look different, act different, all that kind of stuff. And one of the features that struck Darwin about these characteristics is that they seemed that like those characteristics were for use controlling the other sex or attracting the other sex. And let's say if they had big antlers, not exactly for defending against predators. And that a lot of these features actually reduced fitness in terms of survival. So if you can, so for example, this male here is a male bird of paradise, one of many species. And the males have these incredible plumes, and then they do this incredible display for a female who looks rather drab. Okay, so, and she is there basically to choose a mate. And the males do this on this big display ground called a lek. And then if a female actually likes the male, she'll copulate with him. Okay, now there's also the case where a lot of males have these weapons that aren't for predators but seem to be used instead for fighting amongst males and driving weaker males off, so that individuals with who are stronger will get all the females, and it's called a harem. It's called polygyny, like this, or like this. An Irish elk that is extinct now, but it was very, very much bigger than, let's say, a moose today. And then, of course, for humans, there's male-male competition, right? Female choice, and then females also. Males also choose females, and females also compete against each other. So here we are with sexual selection again. Now, this was a hypothesis that, and it's actually part of what's called sexual selection theory. And instead of actually favoring traits that help in survival, it's about favoring traits that help get mates and having more offspring. So the sexual form of selection depends not on a struggle for existence, but on a struggle between the males for possession of the females. The result is not death to the unsuccessful competitor, but few or no offspring. So how can secondary sexual characteristics exist when they conflict with natural selection and reduce the animal's survival? One thing I got to do here, hold on. So here we are again. And I mentioned about, so there's two kinds of sexual selection. There's intersexual selection. That means inter is between different sexes. In this case, it's female choice. The male displays for the female, if she feels the male is of good quality, mates with him. Of course, she doesn't think about it that way, but obviously a male who can display more intensely and for longer periods of time might indicate that he's got greater stamina because of better genes. And so she could perhaps rely on those characteristics, because a male who doesn't have such good genes could not display or have such beautiful plumes as one who does. And then intrasexual competition is usually male-male competition, but it also could be female-female. because there's 6-role reversal in some species. And in this case, the same sexes fight for access to the other sex. And the winner usually ends up with a harem. That means he drives all the other males away. And obviously you can see how that would affect fitness. So in male-male competition, I'll watch this. Select all, define, search the web. If you watch this, this is male-male competition between male bull elk. The males defend a harem. It looks like the winner, the one who's the head male there, actually has been injured, but he's still the best and eventually drives them all off. But it's unlikely he'll actually hold the harem for the whole time period, because they tend not to eat. They just tend to actually have as much sex as possible. Why does sexual selection exist? So, in other words, what does Arnold Schwarzenegger and a male toadfish have in common? They both produce lots and lots of small, cheap sperm. So, when you have different sized gametes, it's called anisogamy. There's an asymmetry in gamete size. It also creates an asymmetry. That means it's unequal. It creates an automatic conflict between the reproductive strategies of the sexes. And here's why. Female reproductive success usually is limited by resources because she has fewer, larger eggs and offspring. And so she's got to be very picky about who she mates with. Whereas with males, because of small, inexpensive sperm, a male's reproductive success is typically limited by the number of females he can mate with. Now, just so you know that it turns out females often have sex with multiple males in the animal world for a number of different reasons. One of them might be like birds that male and female raise offspring. Females might actually go and have sex with a neighbor who, let's say, has better genes, at least she finds them more attractive, even though she picked the male she has, not because she wanted to, but because he was the only one available, and now maybe he won't know it, that he'll be raising this other male's offspring. Now, so in terms of variation, in terms of success, reproductive success, you can actually see what's going on here. So females usually are limited in the number of offspring they can produce. Shows here, let's say, a female producing 50 offspring or so. And it might be, let's say, a frog that lays 50 eggs or something like that, or 50 tadpoles. For human females, usually less than 10, sometimes 2. But anyway, it's limited. Now for males, though, there's a tremendous variation. If you actually follow this line down, you see that there's only a few males that actually produce lots of offspring. And then there's a lot of them that produce almost no offspring. Okay, so here the winners are. All the losers are all down here. And that's where you get kind of like a harem mating system. So this is the kind of theory behind why males compete amongst themselves, and in terms of either attractiveness or in terms of fighting for access to females, and while by females are so choosy. Didn't record all that. I'll go back when I post this. I'll go back and make that spiel so that you can actually hear it. Okay. Okay, so this is the female choice video of the moonwalking bird. It's called a mannequin, one of many. And as I mentioned at the end of the video, the males are the ones that display. It's a lek displaying bird, which means that it always comes back to the same spot. And then females come and watch males dance and display. And if they like the male, this is female choice, so it's intersexual selection. In other words, different sexes, female choice, then she'll mate with the males. Display indicates perhaps genetic fitness. So only that display, obviously the birds are very conspicuous. They have a bright red cap. If they've survived long enough to mate with, that means that they probably have pretty good genes, because even though being conspicuous like this is probably something that would reduce a male's fitness in terms of survival from predation. But if they are still there when they are able to mate, and display for the female, it means they've at least survived that long. It's also expensive to actually display like that. Perhaps the color of the head might be different depending on how good they are at foraging. And obviously the display is very energetically taxing, and so the longer a male can do it and the more flamboyant, the more likely it is that a female would like him. The female, in terms of her offspring, she puts more resources into her offspring, and so she wants the best genes possible. She doesn't think this, but that's the idea, is that there's some traits that give a female a good idea of what kind of genes an individual male has. And so if one male displays more energetically than another, you can't get a cheater invading. What I mean by this is only those males in great condition that have good enough condition and great condition that they can actually do a really fantastic display can do that. Males that couldn't do that because they don't have the same sort of resources and condition, they'll do a lesser display, and so the females can actually rank them. Here's another one. This is a bluebird of paradise in New Guinea. I could show you that, but let's get going. I'll put the web address on the video so that you can look at it yourself. But this is the male, makes these extraordinary display. The female comes along and checks him out, and in the end, unfortunately, she says, nah, not quite. I've also added Cornell University birds of paradise in general. They're really extraordinary. Just amazing displays. They all display on a lek. Females come along, choose which ones they want to mate with. As I mentioned, other birds are socially monogamous, where it takes two parents to actually raise offspring. But it doesn't mean that they don't fool around. I've also added this bit of birds of paradise, just so you look at them. Okay, now, human sexual selection and biparental care. Because I mentioned about the theory behind it, that males produce lots of cheap sperm, females expensive eggs, and then parental care. So in other words, the female's usually investing more in offspring than the male. And so she can afford to be choosy, whereas he can't. Now, in humans, there's often biparental care. So in this case, you often see the same sorts of competition going on, not only among males, but also among females for access to the best males. So intersexual, in other words, between males and males and females and females. Intersexual make choice. Females choose who they like. Males choose who they like. There's a multitude of mating systems in humans. Promiscuous mating systems. That's not a value judgment, that's just the kind of mating system it is. Serial monogamy, polygyny, harems, if you want to go see one, go to the Sultan of Brunei. There's actually even a few cases of polyandry where there's one male and a couple of males. And there's also, of course, sexual dimorphism. Males are generally larger than females. There are some traits, though, sexually selected traits. One thing is that female receptivity, it's not like there's a time of estrus, let's say for a month in the spring, where males and females mate. Females are always, in terms of sex, receptive. Not that they say, well, no, I don't want to have sex now. It's just that they're receptive all the time. It's not a single period. And it's thought to, because of concealed ovulation. So it's only a short window during the monthly cycle that females can most likely get pregnant. Of course, there's breasts and buttocks that males like, waist to hip ratio, minimal body hair, a high sweet voice. And then larger males, they don't have concealed ovulation, but they have concealed feelings, right? Males don't like to show their feelings. Maybe they get mad. V-shaped torso, muscle definition, low, deep voice, much grunting, hairy and aggressive. Okay. Any females in here like low, deep voices? How about they like high, sweet voices? Guys aren't playing, you don't know much about an audience right now. So you would just as likely go out with a guy with a kind of a voice like this. That's pretty good, huh? I actually met a guy like that in Italy. It turns out his whole village had a mutation where they had a voice like that. It was hilarious. I couldn't believe it. No, it was, the whole village. It was obviously a mutation that spread within the village. Just incredible. Also, of course, women, do you like larger guys or shorter guys? Larger, right? Okay. Guys, you like women with a high, sweet voice? Or, come on, of course you do. Let's see. Probably you like going out with girls or women that are shorter than you. So there's sexual selection going on there. Now, I have a question. So, why would females like larger males? And what? Mm-hmm. And why would that be necessary? Think about our evolutionary history, though. Yeah.
Because before we were living in like cities, we were just walking around and there were lots of things that feed us.
Yeah.
And if I'm holding like a kid or something, how am I gonna be able to protect myself if my hands are full?
Yeah, yeah. And the husband knows that, if you don't protect me, it's not looking good for you, if there's any more you, right? Okay. So also, not just predators, but other males. So a lot of females, they like, let's say, aggressive males. Even if those males actually might push them around, at least it's kind of like he's my asshole and he's not going to be some other guy who comes in and rapes me and then kills me or something like that. So you can see in the past how, there was a lot, the social environment can be, for humans, the most important environment is the social environment. How you navigate the social environment. And there's lots of conflicting things going on there. Okay? Now, of course, we have laws against rape, so there's a pretty high price to pay in terms of fitness, right, for a male who rapes. But if you go to the Congo, where they use rape as a military weapon, it's quite common, and there's not going to be anyone to put those guys in jail. They're actually increasing their offspring.
What do you mean by military weapon?
What?
What do you mean by military weapon?
Well, a lot of soldiers actually are instructed to, rape the local population, produce offspring, and and just pretty much just be badasses, Okay, it's very anywhere there's a war zone, you're going to find it. Okay, in general. Okay. So that doesn't mean here that I'm approving of rape. I'm saying it's actually common. We don't call it rape. We call it coercive reproduction or something like that. But it seems to be fairly common in in other animals, and it's obviously throughout history it's been fairly common with humans too. Though obviously if there's a high price to pay, there's, in other words, going to jail or someone killing you or whatever, that reduces the incidence of it, but it's still too much. Okay, so Darwin's second great idea, descent from a common ancestor. Okay. I want you to think about it in the same way that you think about a family tree. Okay. First of all, this is not your family tree. This is your family tree. Here's your great-grandparents. Okay. Here's your grandparents. Here's your parents. Here's your siblings, cousins, second cousins. Okay. And then in terms of species, you have the same sorts of things. You have common ancestors of all vertebrates here, including fishes, amphibians, so this is common ancestors of all four-legged vertebrates called tetrapods. Common ancestors of mammals, which are also tetrapods, and they have fur, and they lactate, females do, and then you. Okay? So what this is right here is called a phylogeny. It actually shows evolutionary history. It shows that all vertebrates, there was a common ancestor for all vertebrates. In other words, fish, various kinds of fish, including sharks and rays and bony fish and other lineages of fishes that have gone extinct. There's also jawed fishes versus fishes that didn't have jaws. Those are very old. And then eventually we end up with tetrapods. So tetrapods descended from some kind of fish. We know it was actually a lobe-fin fish. There's a few examples still around. And eventually, and they lived in like shallow water, where perhaps being able to crawl around a little bit, not completely out of water, might have been useful. Amphibians, which need to be near water or in water all the time, frogs and salamanders. There's no reptiles up here, but they're there. And reptiles include birds. And then mammals, which are descended from a common reptile tetrapod. And they have certain features, like I said, fur. Common ancestor of amphibians, they also have certain features that define them that no other group might have. So there's characteristics that species or taxa have that they share in common with common ancestry versus having similar features that they originate independently. We'll get to that in a little second. But I just want you to understand that when you're looking at something like this, well, and here it's like you're going from older to younger. And you should probably see the same sort of thing in the fossil record as well. So in the fossil record, you could expect to see fishes in a certain strata, and from that strata on all the way up, but you wouldn't necessarily expect to see mammals in lower strata where there are only, before there were any vertebrate, any tetrapods at all. Okay. So, why do family members resemble each other? What do you think? Why do family members resemble each other? Right. They inherited genes common to their parents and their grandparents and further back. Is the resemblance of relatives similar to the resemblance of species? Any ideas? If they share common ancestry, yes. So in here, like I showed you, all tetrapods all share from this point on, they share having 4 legs, even if they lost those 4 legs like snakes or whales. Okay? Fishes. There was a common vertebrate ancestor that gave rise to fishes and everything else. So the fishes are kind of like, let's see, great-grandparents, or I guess, is that right? Yep. This is like common ancestor, grandparents, parents, okay? Same sort of thing. So the resemblance is there because of common ancestry. In other words, sharing many of the same genes and alleles. Why might descendants of either resemble their ancestors? We already just talked about that. Or in a family, it's because you've inherited certain alleles from your parents. And why are neither descendants of families or species identical? Well, we know that things change over time, usually due to mutations. Now, if humans reproduced by cloning, there would be 100 and something people in here that all looked exactly the same. Okay? And let's say one of them had a mutation that let them survive better. They couldn't pass it on. They would just have to, well, they could pass it on to their offspring, but it wouldn't spread through the population in the same way that sexual reproduction is. So, sex allows new mutations that are beneficial to spread through the population more rapidly. But descendants, you're not identical to your parents. You're half related. You're half related, 0.5. In other words, 50% of your alleles are shared with your full siblings, brothers and sisters. A quarter with your half siblings. If an uncle versus a nephew or niece, that's a quarter. Cousins, 1/8. Second cousins, 1/32. So you can see that within families they share a certain percentage of their alleles by common descent. But they don't look identical. And in fact, you don't, same thing with species. Species are defined as generally as distinct. They usually have some features that distinguish them from other species. Okay, so previously we looked at about predictions that you would see if you expected evolution by natural selection, including evidence of populations changing, things like that. There's several lines of evidence in terms of common ancestry. If you look at the fossil record, you would expect certain fossils in certain strata. So if more recently evolved things, and you found a fossil like that, in an earlier strata, it would basically make you question whether there was such a thing as common ancestry. There's also something called homology. Homo is same. So you might have similar anatomy or physiology, behavior, developmental pathways. They're similar because they've been inherited from a common ancestor. So homology are characteristics that are similar because of common ancestry. So if you look at the bones of tetrapods, you've got humerus, you've got the wrist bones, the phalanges, all that. You can see those same bones in other tetrapods, as we'll see. There's also sections of DNA that organisms who are more common, with a more recent common ancestor, share more DNA than species that are more distantly related. Descent from common ancestor affects how lineages evolve through time. In other words, it's kind of like why pigs don't fly. Pigs don't fly because there's a constraint in how they develop. And of course there are flying mammals or bats, but it's not like the lineage of a pig could suddenly, have an individual who can suddenly fly. There's constraints. There's something called transitional taxa. That means kind of like intermediate taxa, new species formation, and then there's biogeography that we talked about earlier with Wallace. We'll get into more at this point. And that is, why do you find certain organisms on certain in certain places? Like, why are all the bird species in Hawaii, why do they seem to be related to each other? And what's their closest relative, and where is that relative at? Why are there only marsupials in Australia, whereas everywhere else it seems like placental mammals? There's a few marsupials elsewhere, but not nearly as many as like Australia. So here we are in the fossil record. Ancestor of all vertebrates, there's jawless fishes, sharks and rays. Now this is also a phylogeny, like we showed before. Okay? As you can see, time is actually going differently. So these are the oldest taxa. These are the youngest taxa up here. Okay? Actually, mammals and reptiles, mammals broke off from reptiles earlier than birds did. Okay. And you can see that birds and reptiles are actually, birds are actually reptiles. They're souped up reptiles. And they're related to another group of reptiles that's now extinct called the dinosaurs. So this is what you'd expect in the fossil. Same here, right? So this is the order of evolution that you would expect. You wouldn't expect fish, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. Okay? You see certain things in the fossil record at certain times because that's when they evolved. So if we look at this kind of thing right here, we see at the very bottom we have these, this is during the Ordovician, guess what, 400 and something million years ago. You see the first jawless fishes. These are placoderms, which is a lineage of fish that is extinct now. Mississippian, the Permian, there was a mass extinction. You can see Then this is when it looks like amphibians were first showing up, which is Devonian. Reptiles afterwards, and then birds, mammals went off from reptiles earlier, so these are, in other words, events that led to new lineages, and so on. So, why are traits nested in a hierarchical pattern? In other words, you see things like vertebrates, and nested within vertebrates are all vertebrates, including amphibians, including fishes, including mammals, including birds. They all share being vertebrates from a common ancestor. So they're nested within. So if you look it up here, and then there's also certain features that are unique to certain lineages. So tetrapods, they have 4 limbs. All tetrapods have 4 limbs unless they lost them. There's these things called amniotes. They have an amniotic egg. That means the egg can actually survive outside of water. In terms of birds, they're also 4-limbed. They also have an amniotic egg, but they have some other things. They have feathers that no other lineage living today actually has. So it's nested within these other characteristics that are older. So, as I've drawn here, where did I draw? Oh, here we go. Okay, so I drew in terms of this circle up here. On the outside, we have tetrapods that are vertebrates, then an amniotic egg. And then inside that is a bird with feathers. Now, it turns out that a lot of animals, the first 4 limbs showed up much earlier than the first bird. As we can see over on the left. And so all these individuals are tetrapods. Birds are only one specific group of tetrapods, and they have a feature or characteristic that none of the other ones have, and that's feathers. So you can see in terms of time that the first animals had vertebrates had backbones. That means they had a cranium and hard vertebral column that protected the spinal cord. Those were some kinds of fish. There were also actually jawless fish, some fish called placoderms, which are extinct, and then sharks and rays and bony fish. They all had backbones. Tetrapods, animals with 4 limbs, even though the ones that have lost them, like snakes and whales. And that defines including amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds. Mammals, reptiles, mammals, and birds all had an amniotic egg that appeared later in the fossil record than the first backbones. And then birds and feathers, actually dinosaurs had feathers also, subsequently appeared even later. Mammals actually appeared a little earlier in the fossil record than birds. They split off from the reptiles earlier. Now, there have been mass extinctions during the Earth's history. We actually recognize five of them from the Cambrian onward. The Cambrian is about 530 million years ago. That's when it started. There was a late Cambrian extinction. Now, all these peaks, though, even some of these lesser ones, show extinctions of whole groups of taxa. biggest one was called the end Permian, where about 90% of all species on the planet went extinct. The largest one more recently is the one that killed off the dinosaurs from an asteroid. Okay? Now, extinction changes everything. There were also, of course, since the last ice age, there was a major die-off of, let's say, large mammals in North America, so that we only have what we have left now. But there used to be horses, ancient horses, giraffes, all different kinds of carnivores like saber-toothed cats. All those things are now extinct because of things changed when it got warmer. So extinction has a huge effect on the kind of life that you see today, because you might have had there was these things called trilobites that are, they look like horseshoe crabs. They ruled until, I think, the late Devonian extinction. They ruled the seas. They were a huge part of the fauna of all the animals in the oceans at that period of time. During that extinction, they all went extinct, that whole lineage. That was, at one point, one of the major vertebrate lineage, one of the major animal lineages. Okay? They have no descendants. So here's homology again. Okay. Okay. So this is the way. This is the leg of a turtle. Human, horse, bird, bat, and seal. Okay? They all look a little bit different, but they're the same bone in terms of where they came from. Okay? Even though they look very different, they're actually inherited, and this has been natural selection that has been modifying those things so that you end up with a turtle with an arm like that, with human, with a horse that's lost all the phalanges down here. The birds have these here, very reduced. The bat, you can see how it's all spread apart. All those things are homologous structures. That means from a common ancestor. You can also see the same sort of things in terms of development. So developmental homology. There's a chicken and a human here. They both have tails. When they develop, both of them actually lose those tails. Other species or other taxa retain them. They also have gill arches, and those go away as well. Though if you're a fish and developing, you go along this pathway too, and then you still have gills at the end. You also have genetic homology. Okay, so this is for the human eye. And there's a gene mutation that causes aniridia, which is it's an eye disease, a genetic eye disease where they can't see. And those same stretches of DNA, they're shared, but there's been other mutations that lead to other amino acids in protein in fruit flies, so the fruit flies develop without eyes. Okay, so these are similar genetic homologies, same genes, slightly different, but the same ancestors. Okay. vestigial traits. This is a snake. You can actually see foot bones, ankle bones, toes. Snakes don't have those ankles and toes anymore. They have ribs, they have femurs, pelvises that you can see that are vestigial. In other words, in the bone structure, they're still there, but they've lost function. That's what's called vestigial trait. Human tailbone, vestigial. Our ancestors, when we shared an ancestor with other primates that had tails, we had tails now, or our ancestors did. It turns out there's great apes, and we're one of the great apes, because all great apes lost their tails. Occasionally, things go a little wacko. Here's a werewolf. Now you're thinking, werewolves aren't real. Yeah, they are. There's something called werewolf syndrome. And it turns out that if you look at embryos as they develop hair called lanego. And then as they develop further, they lose it. So you end up with hairless apes, like we are. Occasionally, instead of those genes that control that, they keep producing hair, and so you end up with a person that comes out with a lot of hair, called werewolf syndrome. And I think we'll leave it at that. I'm going to open up a bunch of top hat questions right now. They'll stay open until next class on Wednesday. Okay? You can start looking over the exam study guide. I'm going to change it a little bit, but it's pretty much what we're going to be covering. Okay?
Is the exam,
What?
it going to be like paper and pencil or on?
It'll be a Scantron.
Okay, and how many questions do we have?
50.
50?
Yeah.
Okay. And we have the whole hour 50?
Yeah. Yep.
I have a question about the exam. It's next week, right?
What?
Next week.
Yeah, Wednesday.
And is it gonna have questions from like
Everything that we've covered.
Okay.
Everything. So, scientific method and then all this evolution stuff.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay?
I emailed you this morning. My top hat wasn't letting me answer the antibiotic questions. It
Okay.
says it was open, and then I click it, and it says your instructor like, closed it or something. But when I got to class, I tried it on my phone. Some of them worked, but some of them didn't. So I didn't understand.
Oh, I might have closed some of them.
But I mean, I tried it last night too, and it didn't work. That's why I tried this morning, and I emailed you about it.
Okay. What are you doing right now? Do you have class? Or?
No.
Okay, let's go up to my office and take a look at it.